we're also streaming to Facebook. We've got,
Sure. I mean, let me just say for a start that, you know, Lee and I actually said, should we go ahead with this with all the momentous things going on in America today? And we decided yes, because, you know, health is important, even if other things are incredibly important as well. And that, you know, we hope down the road that, you know, the helping the health of the population is going to be beneficial for other things as well. But we're aware that this is not the only thing that's on people's minds today.
yeah, we hope we can provide you with maybe a pleasant distraction from everything that's going on in the world.
Yeah.
And
The world's gone crazy, and we have to hope it's temporary.
yeah, you know, there's, I wish I could, oh, here we go. Just getting the Facebook going. Okay, we're live on Facebook. Hello, Facebook. And welcome everybody who's still arriving. Let us know where you're dialing in from or watching from. It's great to see where everybody's connecting from. You know, we were just talking about this fact that there's so much going on in the world, and all the stresses that are going on in the world are reflected in people, the way people eat, right? You know, we can stay in our lane and we can affect what we can affect. You know, what we're really good at is helping people be healthier and live their best life so that they can go out into the world and make and be the change and show and be a good example for others and do the best that they can do. So in a way, the part that we're playing here is by supporting your health, your happiness, your efficacy in the world. Then you can go out and spread that and do whatever you can do. There's a concept in psychology and in self-help of knowing where your limits are, you know, your locus of control. You know, like if I have a flat tire, I'm driving, I have a flat tire. I can, so with a problem, you can fix it, you can ignore it, you can try to make systemic changes, right? With the flat tire example, the first thing you do is you fix the flat tire. The thing that you don't do is just sit there and cry about the fact that I should be in a hover car now because it's 2020 and we shouldn't even have tires, right? Or I shouldn't even be in the car because somebody should have done something else, right? So it's important to sort of keep your perspective and know that there are things you can fix now and there are things you can work on fixing later that are much bigger. And knowing where to put your focus at the appropriate times in the appropriate ways is a very supportive realization. It's very supportive to know what you can do and what's going to take longer to change and fix. So what we're here to help you do is to work on your health. If you have more energy, if you're not worried about some of these things that we can help you with, then you'll have more energy and time to help yourself in other ways. So let's give you what we promised you. I'm so excited to be having this conversation with Dr. Roberts. I really am, because I want to hear the history of iDiet. Like, I really want to hear the scoop, the story about how this all got started. And we've never actually talked about it in this way with this degree of depth. So I'm just tickled pink. You know, so Dr. Roberts, let's start with, you know, we were chatting beforehand about, like, even before you wrote the book, right? Even before you created the diet, you were a scientist and you were focused on metabolisms and some other things, and you did a bit of a pivot. So could you take us back to that very beginning and give us a context for the conversation that we're about to have?
Yeah, sure. So when I was in graduate school for nutrition, I always intended to do my PhD in obesity research. That was what fascinated me. I had a history, everything was great. And then that got derailed because this very cool job in Africa got advertised. And I couldn't think of anything more exciting than going out to Africa for 2 years to do malnutrition research. So instead of doing a PhD, I ended up in a tiny little country in West Africa, living in a village with no electricity or running water for 2 years doing malnutrition research. When I took up my PhD again, it was in mathematical stable isotope modeling, kind of math stuff, actually. And it was only when I moved to America that I started to reclaim my roots. And so first of all, I kept doing this stable isotope mathematical modeling. There's lots of funding and research for that. But I just wasn't satisfied. I wanted to be on the front line. I wanted to do obesity research. So, there was a point at which I just deliberately rebooted my whole lab to do behavior change and nutrition research, pretty much focused on adult obesity. But I was doing that for nearly a decade before I decided that there was, something I wanted to say, something that I thought could really maybe help the world if we put it out in the right way.
Right. Yeah. And as you told me before, like you really, like you have a mission on this planet also, which is solving the obesity crisis.
I mean, that sounds crazy, but yes, I do. I mean, I was the fattest kid in my school. That was such a shameful thing. It was so difficult to live with. I love food. I'm a foodie. I even kind of toyed with being a chef at some point. So yes, I absolutely want to do my bit to trying to reduce obesity by making it easier and more sustainable for people. And, it took me really at least a decade of research before I felt that there were things that we could do that would really help. And I came to think also that, the traditional ways of going about this in many ways are positively counterproductive. And, that's an important message too, in fact.
Yeah, we'll talk more about that as we get into this. So what you ended up with is a program that gives average results 2 or 3 times better than other programs, written up in big journals. You're on TV, the brain scan study, all that stuff. So take us from like doing pure science and then taking that detour into malnutrition research, which you're still doing also in parallel to obesity. So let's not underplay this other good stuff that you're doing in the world, right? And then you ended up writing a book, but what happened in the middle there when you pivoted back to obesity research? You found this mission, and then
First of all, there were so many obvious questions. I needed to review all of the literatures. I reviewed the literature on fiber. I reviewed the literature on protein. I reviewed the literature on behavior change. I did all of those kind of separate things. And there was a point where I thought, it's time to put it all back together again. And I made a few decisions for how to think about that, which I think were very important. And the first one was, this wasn't just going to be about my own lab's research. We were going to take the best research from everywhere and package it together into an evidence-based formula. That was really important. And the second thing is that we wouldn't stop that process. That, just because this is my job, I'm a research scientist, I continue to review the literature. I mean, I would like to say every week. Sometimes it's not quite as frequent as every week. And if there's something good that comes out, it doesn't matter whether it's from my lab. If it's something that's important and can help our dieters, we're going to put that into the program. I don't think there should be any ego about, is this my idea or somebody else's idea? We should be putting it all together. So that's what I did. I went through a very intensive process of really reading everything on all of these topics before working out how to package things again. And the other important decision I made was that I was going to largely do this based on consensus results. Nutrition is just so ridiculously controversial. Half the studies on saturated fats say one thing, half of them say totally the opposite. They're really kind of, high quality, good scientists from good institutions who disagree about stuff like that. It's not a simple thing at all. And I thought, but the trouble is if you try and use those results, it's clear that the way the experiments are done make such a big difference to the results that I couldn't see how you could turn that into a resilient program that somebody in their own house and another person in a different house in a different social situation could all make it work easily. So I made a decision that we were going to focus on consensus first of all, and see where that took us.
You made so many good points here. So like one is a lot of other programs fail because they're based on one trick. Like we're just focusing on carbs, or we're just focusing on protein,
Right.
or we're eliminating major things and focusing. And that's, to your point about, my idea is above all other ideas, as opposed to what you've done, which is you pull together all the science, you exclude no good ideas, and then also synergistic effects. Like there are some programs that focus so much on one thing that if you try to bring in something else, it all falls apart.
Right.
And
Right.
having experienced this with so many people for so long, everything that you brought into the program works together and is there's a network effect. There's an amplification of all the different components working together.
That's the idea, right? And when I went into the literature, I was surprised at what kind of simple things people could agree on. They can't agree on how important saturated fat is. They can't even agree on how important sodium is, for example. But everybody can agree on the fact that if somebody gets hungry, they want to eat. They can agree on the fact that if there's more food available, people will eat more. They can agree on the fact that if there's a bigger variety of food, people eat more variety, that calorie density is more popular, that it's calorie dense foods that people crave, and that people like stuff that's familiar. They like things that are slightly outside the familiar as well, but you don't have people in America eating ants, for example. You don't have it. And those 5 principles, hunger, availability, variety, calorie density, and familiarity, they were the only things in the literature that I could find that were truly non-controversial. And they seem like really simple things, but we started with that foundation of things which we've called our food instincts. I think, kind of a classical psychologist would call them drives, but they're things which reliably push our buttons. And some people may be more sensitive to one than the other. Some people get more hungry. Some people are more tempted by food lying around. Some people are more tempted by high calorie foods. Some people are tempted by all of those things. But all of the studies agree, not just in humans, as well in laboratory animals, in fruit flies, in all kinds of trout, in all kinds of strange species that have been studied. Those things really drive food intake. So we started with that. And then there was a second layer of science which said, okay, well, what about hunger? We know that hunger and feeling satisfied is important for people who are trying to lose weight and keep weight off. What are the dietary compositions that are beneficial for hunger? They stop hunger returning too soon, or they keep you feeling full for longer. And again, there was really good consistency. Pretty much, if you think about the short-term studies, the meal-to-meal studies, the one-day studies, those are the ones I focused on because that's what hunger is. It determines how much lunch you eat. It determines how much dinner you eat, whether you want a snack in the mid-afternoon. So it's really the short-term studies that are very illuminating. And they all say the same thing. They say that high fiber foods are more satisfying, that high protein, lower carb foods are more satisfying, that low glycemic index carbs are more satisfying. They slow the return of hunger, and that high volume foods are good too. So it's 4 dietary factors. And so what we did with iDiet is we bundled them all together. We said, let's try and create a program where we're using all of these things. We're not just focusing on glycemic index. We're not just focusing only on fiber. We're going to create a program where we use all of the evidence-based information on nutrition. Now, you can't always get all of those factors into every meal, but we've created a program where you can get at least 2 into every meal. And so you've got multiple factors But it also allows for a diversity of composition because, for example, if you say, okay, there's a high protein and high volume, those are both effective, that gives you one type of meal. Another type of meal is high volume and high fiber. That's kind of a low fat vegetarian or vegan meal. A low glycemic index carbs, it's more of a Mediterranean style. So we have a default composition that uses all of those things, but we're also quite flexible because we use different combinations.
Yes, yes. And when people come to us with a food allergy or a specific style that they want to eat in, we work around those constraints because we have these principles that everything is flowing from. Right? For anybody who wants to be able to follow along this conversation with some visuals, I put a link in the chat to the 5 food instincts on our website because we didn't have a slide to put up, but we have a lot of slides when you're in our programs, but there's a link to our website that lists the 5 food instincts and you can read a little bit more about it there. And of course it's in your book, etc. You're also leading us, this is great because you're leading us also from this focus on food. Like I think even people who've been in the programs for a long time, think so much about the food and the menus and the dietary composition that they lose sight of the psychological aspects and the behavior change aspects. These are all things that you've built into the program. So I want to hear more about like how you move from the lab into the book, et cetera. But while we're on this topic, could you just tell us about because there are other things that you do with this that aren't just what you put in your mouth.
So you're saying, is psychology important? Absolutely. And, can we do a call out that I'm a professor of psychiatry as well as a professor of nutrition? So
Right.
Absolutely, I take that seriously. But the way we've designed iDiet is we start with the food. On day one of the program, as you know, we don't talk too much about the psychological issues that people have. And that's very intentional for the reason that if you're hungry, you can't address the psychology. If you're starving hungry, you're not going to do a good job with emotional eating. You're just not. And so if we start with the food and we get people feeling full and satisfied, then in the subsequent weeks, we can start to pick off all of the different psychological issues that come up as well. But so we intentionally do it second because I think that that's a more effective way to do that. I mean, certainly, in America, in Britain as well, for that matter, too, the whole food environment is so dysfunctional that it creates behavioral problems, psychological problems with food. People struggle. And so those things are just part of the package that we need to deal with today.
Yeah, the whole food environment is designed for profit. It's not designed for health. It's a very skewed, messed up system. So how did you come to actually, so you were doing all this research, putting it all together, you'd been doing laboratory style research. How did this start to intersect with people? When did you first start using this on people and how did that go?
Right. Well, so the original, there's actually been 2 books and they have almost identical content. The first one was called The Instinct Diet. And my publisher was very good. They went along, this was Workman. They went along with my plan, which was basically to use a process that's identical to the way the dietary guidelines are developed for general nutrition. And that was to package together all of the best science, all of the best evidence into a single set of recommendations. And we did that, and that was the Instinct Diet. And so
using a scientific method, right? Again, you're following, there's a procedure, there's a way you do this in science that's very methodical and without ego, right? And so that's what I'm hearing you're saying. Just do the process.
And I love being a scientist, so I do it the scientific way.
Yeah.
So we did that, but then at some point, my publisher said to, you have to have some voices here. What about people? And I said, well, that's not how this was designed. I just put all the best science together. And she said, so go out and get some people and let them go through this. And so I put an advertisement in my local newspaper, anybody who would like some help losing weight to come and meet in the room above my garage every week for a few weeks. And I would walk them through the book. And So the embarrassing thing was that those people, that first group, and many of them I didn't know, many of them became friends. They lost way more weight than I'd ever projected in the first book. Has anybody heard of a diet book where people were losing more weight than they promised? I don't think so. So my publisher republished the book, basically to get the voices in and to talk about the success. And I think people did so well because it was easy to follow, and because it was easy to follow, they were very adherent. And I had assumed a level of kind of non-adherence in my calculations for the first book that simply weren't happening. People were able to stay very fully on the program, and as a result of that, they lost more weight than we had estimated they would. And it was great. And that was how the Instinct Diet turned into the iDiet, because in order to republish it, they needed a new name.
Gotcha, right. So your publisher wanted to be able to tell stories about dieters. That's how those people got on the cover of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you're like, no, this is science. It's going to work. Here's the science. And they're like, no, tell stories. We need to tell stories. That's so
Writing
interesting.
books, a totally different thing from being a scientist. I learned a lot, I have to say.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm sure, well, maybe a tiny piece of their adherence was they were literally doing it with you, they were doing it with Dr. Roberts. I mean, you weren't like Dr. Roberts at that point, but you're very you're a very good practitioner of this. Like, I'm sure you modeled things for them very well, just like we were talking about.
Well, maybe, but as you know, we've had extraordinary success. If people who I've never had any contact who've been through the program since then. I mean, the number I'm aware of is I know somebody lost 130 pounds. And, I didn't have anything to do with that at all. So, maybe I make a bit of a difference, but I think ultimately the program should stand on its own feet.
Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of people they buy the book, they use the book, and they're very happy with just the book.
Yeah.
A lot of people come to us because they read the book. And, we get great stories about people who just read the book. And then, like, you got in the news quite a bit. There's something that I would love to talk about, the difference between, like, because you've had a lot of things published. How many papers, first of all, how many papers are you up to now with your publishing, scientific papers?
I'm looking all around the ceiling because I'm trying to drag up a number. I'm guessing it's 270, 280, something like that. I mean, it's not all of those are on weight management because, in the beginning, there's all this mathematical modeling stuff and some malnutrition and things like that. But a lot of them are.
Yeah, yeah. And one of those papers, and, I also know that, like, you're very intentional about going for peer-reviewed papers, peer-reviewed journals.
That sounds.
And publishing, there's a certain threshold of quality. I think it would be helpful for people to just understand what that even means. Like, if you hear about a study or you hear about results, like you're reading the news, you're on somebody's blog, I'm talking to the audience now, right? And you see, like, somebody got clinical results or somebody's talking about a study. Was it peer reviewed or was it not peer reviewed? That's very important. And I think some people don't understand just how important that is. Could we take just like a detour and talk about that for a sec?
So sure, when you write a paper, you submit it to a journal, and different journals have got what are called different impact factors. So a journal with a high impact factor, it means there's a lot of people read it, a lot of people quote it. So you put your highest quality science in those very high impact journals. And then there's other journals which are very good. They're more specialty journals, for example. And so they're also, journals which other people will take seriously and cite, and you put those papers there. All of those are peer-reviewed papers, which means that when you submit it to the journal, they first of all triage it to decide whether it's something that's of fundamental interest to their readers. And if they think, yes, it's something that they'd potentially be interested in, they send it out to at least 2 and usually 3 scientists who are working in the field to judge the quality of the science. And those scientists always come back with things they want you to change, 100% of the time. Sometimes they want you to redo the statistics. Sometimes they want more explanation on something. But they typically, that process improves the paper. You know, maybe it shortens it, makes it easier to read, adds another table of statistics that you hadn't thought to put in. But it's a very positive and strengthening process. There's a whole other world of journals where you can just submit something and it's basically not peer reviewed. So, you know, you could put any old garbage in there and it's published. Someone can write a blog on it. It's like it's equivalent, but it's not equivalent. And actually there was a really good, there's been some really good examples of that with COVID, because there's things called preprint servers. And that's where when you've got a paper in submission, you can, if you choose, put the paper up on a public site even before it's published. But not all of those papers make it into the top journals. And in fact, there was a case recently of a COVID paper that was published in a top journal and was subsequently retracted. It was about the use of chloroquine. And everybody was saying that was because the peer review had been rushed and the authors hadn't really managed to get an independent verification that the database they were using was good. So, you know, a deliberate, oftentimes agonizingly slow, but a peer review process where the reviews really have a chance to, you know, inform the paper quality is a very important step. I can't think of more than 1 or 2 papers that we haven't had published in peer-reviewed journals.
Yeah. And so, I mean, my advice, at least to people listening to this recording or here with us live, is if you see a science fact quoted somewhere and it's not, you know, one of the top news sources, you might want to go to the footnote and follow it back to the quality of the research, just to make sure. Right. Because people, you know, if it's not a peer-reviewed journal, people could assert anything without other scientists looking over their shoulders to check them.
Yeah, no, I know. It's just you know, it's the internet making this very easy.
Right, it's only amplified. And the peer-reviewed things, like, it can take months for your work to come out too. There's a sort of a gatekeeper and a time delay with this. It can be very frustrating.
Oh, months. I mean, I just had a paper accepted in a British Medical Journal, which is one of the top journals in the world on malnutrition research. And it took a whole year to go through peer review. But the paper is so much better for that. You know, we had multiple comments, we revised it, they came back with some more questions, and they held us to a very high standard because the topics of real importance to public health. And I was just really pleased that we had all of those editors taking the care to do that, because you don't want something to go out that's not repeatable. You know, that would be
absolutely
horrible.
Yeah. Speaking of one of those papers, you put people through an fMRI scanner, and that became a pretty big deal because they were reporting changes in their cravings, changes in their thoughts, and you wanted to see could you tell us about that? How did that happen?
So yes, we put people through the magnets. This was the first randomized trial we did of iDiet, and we did it in work sites in the greater Boston area. And we had some money from a director's fund at Tufts to put some people through the magnet to look. So we had 2 groups. We had a randomized control group who were not receiving the diet, and we had a randomized intervention group who were. So we picked some people out of that by random again to go through the magnet before and after the program, before and after this nothing control group. And we did that because with a MRI scan, you can see inside the brain. Obviously, you can actually focus on the reward center to look and see how susceptible people are to cravings, how desirable they find different foods. And we beamed in all of these pictures. We beamed in pictures of chocolate. We beamed in pictures of fiber cereal. We beamed in pictures of salads, of, you know, different foods. And broadly speaking, we had healthy foods and unhealthy foods, and the difference was just enormous. And that's why, you know, there was so much interest in that study, that we saw a huge increase in interest for healthy food and an actual decrease in interest in the unhealthy foods that people had previously craved. And you didn't see anything like that in the control. So it was a significant result. It was done by a group at Harvard who didn't have any information on who is an intervention subject and who is a control subject. So it was a very properly conducted study.
So is that what they call blinded? Like, so
Yeah,
they weren't, they were a different group. Yeah.
exactly. It was blinded. And, you know, we saw the same result. We saw the same result as people say in when you give them a questionnaire on cravings, for example. They all say, yes, you know, they lose their cravings, they get more control over food with iDiet. And so it didn't say anything fundamentally different, but the fact that it was a biological measure just made it, you know, made it very cool.
Yeah, to see the changes in the brain, to see it graphed and see those slices lighting
Yeah,
up differently. That's, you can trust that. It's not just somebody's word
exactly,
of a preference.
exactly.
Yeah, that's so cool. Was there anything that you tried initially that just didn't work, that you had to cut out or change or pivot?
I don't think I've made any major mistakes yet, you know, touch wood. It's it's both an honor and a stress, if you like, that it's my job to just to be the gatekeeper and what's going to come in and what's going to come out. And I think there's some things which, you know, I reserve my right to change my opinion with over time. But I haven't made any mistakes where I've had to pull anything out yet. So, you know, one example of something I continue to think about is, you know, what about modified fasting? And we do have a modified fast option, as you know, for people who've been through Engage and they're ready to branch out and try something else, and that's fine. But we're not recommending this for kind of every week use, if you like, at this point. And we're not doing that because I worry about the long-term safety. Sure, so short terms you can see some benefits, but do we have good enough data on bone mineral density, for example, immune function, to just, you know, say, okay, go with it, use it 2 times a week, and, you know, you'll be healthy for the rest of your life. I don't feel like we're there yet. So there's some things I'm holding back on. I mean, another example is sugar. Some diets will say no sugar, nothing, you know, it's poison. And I read the literature. I don't think it's poison. It's not health food either. But if somebody wants half a teaspoon of sugar, you know, I don't think that's a terrible thing. So, you know, again, maybe I'll change my mind, but right now I'm saying, let's minimize sugar. If it doesn't speak to you, get rid of it completely. But I'm not jumping up and down saying you have to get rid of every last grain.
Yeah, well, that speaks to the resilience of the program, right? Because like if this was a ketosis program, a little bit of sugar would be ruinous, but this is, there's more flexibility in this sort of a structure.
Right.
You know, we're not trying to trick the body into doing very bizarre things with ketones that every little ounce has such an outsized effect. Speaking of that, do you have a favorite dietary factor, like out of all the things that you've put into it?
I do, fiber. I mean, I think fiber is really super helpful for people, you know, not just because it's effective, although it is effective. And, you know, in my research, where for example, I've shown that fiber doesn't just increase fullness, it also increases metabolic rate, which is a great thing when you're losing weight. But it's my favorite nutrient because it's so easy to add. You can go to the supermarket, you can get a box of high fiber cereal, you can have half a cup twice a day, and you've doubled your fiber intake with no work. So it's my favorite for multiple reasons, but, you know, most especially because it's really easy.
Yeah, and everybody could use more fiber. Like there's not enough fiber in the typical American diet, for sure. And you know, one area of research that I'm really interested in is the microbiome. And I think that everything that we're doing in iDiet is going to show to be very beneficial as that research continues to come out. But again, that's a much longer process, I'm guessing.
Yeah, we have not done any research on the microbiome at this point, but I know from studies that other people are doing that fiber is extremely helpful for the microbiome, that fruits and vegetables and legumes. So everything we're doing, I'm confident will have a beneficial effect. We just haven't measured it yet.
Yeah, especially now when everybody's been so um, intimately and heartbreakingly reminded of the importance of your immune system, your overall health, your inflammation. You know, so many people are succumbing to, you know, the problems right now that if they had been at a different level of health or hadn't had some chronic issues going on, they might have survived. And instead they didn't. And inflammation and obesity are at the heart of many, if you know, maybe almost all of the chronic conditions that people live with.
Yeah, no, and certainly obesity has emerged as a major factor, increased risk of death with COVID-19. So certainly that inflammation and obesity are important. You know, I hope all of the enormous societal changes that we're undergoing right now can, you know, bring us to a better place in the future, that we've got an opportunity to reboot here, and, you know, maybe everybody's health, you know, receiving a benefit from that would be a great outcome.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so two last questions for you. Um, we've been talking a lot about the food, and the way that you've packaged the food is in terms of menus, right? Not like food lists, and not, I mean, we have a lot of recipes, but it's not just like we throw a bunch of recipes at you. It's very specifically in menus, and there's repetition, and there's a
Oh,
pattern to it. So how did you arrive at that? What's the reason? People don't, because that's food and it's psychology, and it's trying to keep things simple for people too, right? To make it really doable and to drive those MRI results that you got. So how does that all work?
so you know, I'm very focused on using the science in all its complexity, but at the user end, it should be as simple as possible. You don't want to have to say somebody needs a PhD in nutrition to lose weight. That's ridiculous. And the menus are a way of channeling complicated science into something that's easy and doable. Um, it gives structure. It, as you say, I mean, the ease is a huge thing. You can build some of the psychology or the behavior change into those menus, the regular meals, the number of meals and snacks, and all of those things. So the menus are, if you like, a vehicle. But also, you know, if you think about our dietary prescription, we're saying, okay, have a high fiber diet, high protein, low glycemic index carbs, and plenty of volume. Nobody can do that. It's
What
too
does that even
complicated.
mean? Those are words, big words. Yeah.
I couldn't do that. I mean, so the menus do all of that for you. You know, we take your weight, your age, your gender, and we project what calorie level will be suitable for weight loss. Not too high, not too low. And then all of that dietary composition, along with as much psychology as we can fit in and habit formation as we can fit in, gets bundled into the menu. So you don't have to think, just go on the menus and you can get started.
Yeah. And then another question, and you know, some questions I get are like, wait a second, where's the complexity? Like people ask me questions about this, expecting me to give them a really complicated answer. I'm like, no, just eat that. Just eat the same thing. You know, simplify your shopping, simplify your meal preparation, make it easy. Like, this is all about making it easier on yourself. And they're like, wait, where's the trick? Right? Where there's got to be a trick. Like, no.
Well, I think the trick is making it easy. You know, that is the trick. You know, that's the first thing I think of. You know, if I read a really interesting scientific paper with something new, my first thought is, you know, could this be effective? But my second thought, I guess, is you know, is it going to be easy? If it's going to make somebody's life complicated, then I'm going to have a second thought about that, because we're all busy. There's too much going on in the world for this to be complicated. Has to be
Yeah.
easy. Has to be sustainable.
Yeah, absolutely. And so last question, you're actually coming to us from the room where it all started, right? That's where the first groups met.
That's right.
Because how are the baby birds doing, by the way?
Oh, they're doing great. Yeah, they do, but they're still very noisy. So I actually wondered whether I could move back to my study, and I spent an hour in there, and it was like, being in a auditorium or something. It was terrible. There's three nests outside my front door now, three, and
Right. Wow. Because Dr. Roberts is coming to us from a room that's far away from all the baby birds that have decided to nest near her regular office. That's in case you were just joining us, you didn't hear that. So last question is, because you started with live groups, people meeting in person, which sounds so weird now, because with social distancing and everything being on Zoom, but it was real groups of people meeting together. And then just of necessity, there was a transition to online. So how did that happen? And you were kind of surprised by that, right?
well, it was a pragmatic decision at first to give it a try. And that was just because it's really hard putting together live groups. You have to find a building, everybody has to come, they have to get in their car and drive, and some people don't feel like going out in the evening, or they don't feel like going out at lunchtime on Sunday. There was just endless number of complications. It was great. You got people in a room, you could look them in the eye, but there was just too many complications to make it easily scalable anywhere in the world. And so we decided to give it a try. And throughout the test, I was saying, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. People are not going to do this. And I had to eat my words. We eventually, as you know, we gave all of the iDiet data to another scientist to do an analysis, which I was not involved in this statistical analysis at all, to see how they compared. There wasn't a bit of difference. In terms of average weight loss, it was identical whether it was an in-person group or an online group.
Wow.
For people who are actively engaged, they come to all the meetings, they don't drop out or anything like that. If anything, the video conference groups had the edge. They were slightly better, and I think that's it's really easy. You can be in your pajamas. You can do it at a time when you wouldn't dream of going outdoors. People who don't have a car or don't like to travel, it's good for them. Um, so
You can
it's
show
just
up
really
if it's snowing, if it's inclement weather.
right. And I became convinced, it was right at the end of the first test, the group leader who had been leading one of the groups, we had these weekly meetings, and she came to this group laughing, and she was laughing because everybody at the end of the meeting, everybody had brought their pet to the Zoom, and they'd all held up their animals, and they were all comparing these cats and dogs and various things. And I thought, okay, there's things you can do on Zoom that you can't do in person.
Oh, yeah, I
Um,
love it when pets show up on camera. Yeah, it's so nice. And I remember like we looked at like 12 different video conferencing services initially to pick the one that we would end up with. And it's so funny that the entire world is on Zoom now because we picked Zoom. They were like a year old when we decided to choose Zoom. We thought they had the better technology platform.
yeah,
And it turns out, luckily we were right and they've succeeded. But it's just interesting that, we were sort of pushing this and now everybody's doing everything on Zoom.
that's right. Well, no, it's a great system, and even at work now, I use Zoom. I used to use WebEx, but we got given the option of having Zoom, and I think everybody's switched over there as well.
Yeah, that's how we felt when we were making those decisions also. No offense, WebEx, I'm sorry. But okay, so thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Or we had one question. How long ago did you start with Zoom? I remember looking at this stuff around 2012. So I think it was 2012 or 2013, Bell, just answering a question in the chat,
Mhm.
when we did that analysis and started. Yeah.
So it's been a while. It's been a while. No, I have not had any cause to regret that. I think the video conference groups are the future, not just for iDiet, but for so many things in life now.
Yeah, yeah. And well, people can join us from anywhere. There are time issues, but we have global participants now, which is fantastic. And that wouldn't be possible if we weren't online. And
That's
then we
right.
can bring in other digital tools as well, and we'll hopefully keep keep expanding on that. So those are all the questions that I brought. Is there anything else you wanted to say that came up for you while we were talking? I see one other question in chat. So we have a medical professional here. To randomized controlled trials, how many regained weight that was lost over time? Now, that's a tricky thing because you have to be tracking people over time. And so the study has to allow for that. I don't know if we can even answer that question, really.
I can answer it without results, which is that we've just completed 2 randomized controlled trials. One of them went to 18 months and one of them went to 2 years. And we're going to be submitting those for publication in the next couple of weeks. I'm extremely pleased with the results. So we've got that length of data. You know, I don't think any diet, we can't follow people beyond the ethical permission for the time that we have to follow people. But I think what we need to continue to do in iDiet is focus on sustainability, because that's the future, if you like. And I've had a lot of people telling me that one of the differences about iDiet is, you lose weight more easily, sure, and that's great. And you have more control over food, and that's great. But probably what people really particularly relish is that once they've lost the weight, sure, they'll go through holidays or something like that where they have a little up and down, but they're able to use the same strategies to catch it quick and get it down. So I wouldn't say that any diet in the world, including iDiet, can have 100% of its participants lose weight and never gain an ounce after that. That would be ridiculous. But I think our long-term results are going to show that we're doing a very good job.
Yeah, and the measures of success for long-term, the measures used in saying there's been long-term success are somewhat flexible. And because so many diets fail at this, like sometimes you'll say like 50% weight regain is considered a success. It can be kind of crazy what the parameters are that people define as success. And I think we are looking for success that's better than 50% weight regain, right?
Oh, much better, much better. And, and more weight loss in the first place. I mean, because I've been writing these papers, I've just been doing a review of other programs. And the National Diabetes Prevention Program has an average weight loss of about 3%. And then, if you gain 50% from that, you're down to minus 1.5%, which is a drop in the bucket.
And that's considered the gold standard diet for diabetes
Well,
care.
I'm happy to change that.
Yeah. And just to be clear for everybody, Dr. Roberts was not trying to dodge the question about weight regain, because when you submit a paper for publication, you're embargoed and you can't talk about the numbers until it's been peer reviewed and gone through the process and then been published. So when it gets out, we'll be happy to crow about those results. But until then, she can't say too much.
No, thank you. Yeah, no. I absolutely can't say what the results are until they're ready to be published.
Yeah, you're under embargo now. As
soon as possible, I hope.
Okay, excellent. Thanks everybody so much for attending. We got one question also, like, how can I become a research subject in one of your trials? That's going to have to do a bit with geography, I would say, because you need to be able to take blood and measure and do things. So people who are local to Boston, just email info@theidiet.com, and we can't promise anything. But what would you like to say about that, Dr. Roberts?
Well, yes, sure. And I would say that all human research is shut down right now at Tufts, Harvard, every other institution in Boston. So we don't have any subjects going on right now. What we do have that we'll be launching very soon for people who have lost at least 5% weight already is we're launching an international weight control registry in which we are asking people who've lost at least 5% weight to sign up and spend what's really going to be probably about 2.5 hours over a month asking a ton of questionnaires so that we can get thousands and thousands of people from different communities in the US and in different countries telling us what they've done, what's been working. And then we're going to create a community for those people to communicate with each other. We'll follow them over time. So that is going to be a research study. And I think there's going to be a huge number of interesting results come out of that.
That's fantastic. And that's not just iDiet, right? That's
Going to be
anybody who's lost weight on any, because you care about the core information. It's not specific to iDiet.
I mean, and let's say today that you previously lost 5% weight on another diet and you haven't actually gone through the iDiet program, you'd be eligible to join the registry. That would be totally fine.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much. Yes, well, so Boston is the only city where you're based, but you are involved in some other programs and some other studies that have multiple sites. But there's that one that's been going on forever that you're involved in.
Certainly. Yes, I mean, I collaborate with institutions all around the US. I have active collaborations right now with Alabama, with, with Kentucky. We've just finished a study where we had collaborators in, I'm thinking we're New York State, Connecticut, Kentucky, Colorado. It changes, whatever the study is, you look for the most appropriate collaborators in different places.
Yeah, that's great. And well, and also you travel to Africa periodically and do your nutrition research also. That might be another conversation that we could have if that sounds interesting to people, like the other stuff that Dr. Roberts is doing, because you're trying to save us from our obesity and you're trying to save other places on the planet from their malnutrition.
I'm lucky to be able to do that. I mean, it's the same research technique, so it doesn't require any different expertise fundamentally. It's just looking at the other end.
Yeah, thank you so much for spending this time with us.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I hope people have enjoyed it and found it useful.
Yeah, I loved it. I hope you all did. I know Dr. Roberts has to go. I can stay on if people have other questions about the program, that kind of thing. I'm happy to answer. We do have classes starting Tuesday and Thursday. So if you're a graduate, I welcome you to join us in On Track, which is the program for graduates. And if you're new to us, we have an Engage group that's starting on Tuesdays. Check it out on our website. Happy to help you. That's what we're here for. So I'll just stay on in case anybody has chat questions. And otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. It's always good to spend time with you. It's nice to see familiar names and familiar faces. So thanks so much. Yeah, thank you, Robin. I don't see any other questions coming through, so I will, can you start? iDiet anytime. Yes, so we have live classes that start about every 6 weeks because it's kind of like semester based. So, we can't be starting them every week because we need a cohort to go through. But about every six or 8 weeks, we have a new group that starts. And we also have a fully online version, which is pre-recorded, that spools out week to week to week. And you can start that any day you want. You just sign up. That's called On Demand. And you do that totally on your own. It's not with a group. So that would be like taking any self-guided online course. But there's a timer on it and you can't jump ahead because it's experiential, right? We want you to do it with us over the set amount of time, not just like read it all up and then not do anything. We want you actually doing it because action is so important to your success. Yeah, great question. Thank you. And that's called On Demand. Yeah. I see some other faces still on. Are you working on typing a question? Or are you just working on logging out people?